First chapter of a romance novel has some quote-unquote rules that you have to follow in order to get the reader to really invest in that story right from the beginning. I put rules in quotes because once you understand the components of a romance novel, you can totally fiddle around with the plot. But you definitely need to understand what makes a romance a romance. Now, for any genre, mystery, thriller, suspense, supernatural, for any kind of genre fiction, basically what makes it that genre is that more than 50% of the plot is dedicated to the genre. A romance novel also has to end with some kind of hope. It doesn't have to end at the altar, but it should end with some kind of happily ever after or happy for now, so that you know that these people are in love and they're going to have a happy future. So it's about love and it's about hope. But here's the thing, the big mistake that almost everybody makes it when they first write a romance novel. I know I did it. That's part of why I wrote 10 books in 8 years before I finally figured out how to write a book. The number one mistake they make is they forget that falling in love is never, ever, ever the goal for any of the main characters. Now wait, that sounds counterintuitive, right? Let me explain how that works. Think about this. If you have a friend whose entire life revolves around falling in love, finding Mr. Right so she can get married and have 17 kids with him, you're going to sit back and say, hey, don't you have any dreams of your own? Don't you have a career you want to pursue? Do you want to be a singer? Do you want to do some art? Like, isn't something else going on in your life besides just falling in love? That's kind of a ginormous red flag, right? For a relationship, if all this person wants to do is fall in love, because then they're lacking everything else in their life. And in a romance novel, the main characters that come together and fall in love already have existing lives. They already have existing goals. So when the romance comes along, it throws a monkey wrench into their plans. Let's talk about how Pretty Woman works with that. Richard Gere has come to LA to buy that business, tear it up into tiny pieces and move on. That is his sole goal. And he picks up Vivian because he's a little lonely. He doesn't want to get emotionally involved with anybody. That's his goal. His life is already going along when the movie starts. Julia Roberts just wants to make enough money to escape the life of prostitution that she's living. So her life is also going along. So when they meet, they're not trying to fall in love with each other. Nobody's trying to find any of that. They're trying to pursue the other things that are important to them. And falling in love complicates that, particularly for Edward, because he doesn't want to get emotionally involved. And when he falls in love with Vivian, all of a sudden he's starting to care about the business owner, he's starting to care about her, he cares about a lot of other things. Having that happen opens up his teeny tiny little heart, kind of like the Grinch. So if the romance is never ever the goal, what is the goal? Well, they'll have external goals already, and they're also going to have internal goals. And if you're confused about what that is, I have a whole 6-part video series on plot that starts with this one right here that explains everything that happens in a plot and how it works. You have to have the external plot in the novel, and you have to have the internal plot, and then the romance plot. And I'll explain how this all works. The internal plot is the emotional one. Every single one of us has some kind of deep emotional wound from our childhood or our past. It doesn't have to be a huge trauma. It can be something as simple as your parents never showing up for any of your band events. But whatever that is, it leaves everybody with some kind of an anxiety or insecurity. And in order for your characters to be ready to fall in love, they have to resolve that. They have to grow and change. Because go back to that friend that only wants to fall in love. If she's got mega fears of abandonment and she falls in love with the first guy that comes along and moves in with him, you're looking at that saying, that is not going to work out. So you want your character to grow and change throughout the novel emotionally so that they are ready for the love story that you're going to give them. Go to that video series if you want more on how to do that. The third thing that a romance novel needs is a meet cute. And this is basically the main characters coming together.
Look at each other, and that's the meet cute.
It has to happen very early in the book, preferably in the first 5 pages. Because when the reader picks up a romance novel and it's labeled as a romance novel, they are expecting to see a romance start right away. They're not reading it for all of that backstory and the history of the character growing up and all of that. They don't care about that. They just want to read about the characters falling in love. That is the main reason that they chose that book. So if you don't deliver that, they're going to close the book and move on. Does it have to be cute? Absolutely not. Vivian and Edward meeting in Pretty Woman, I wouldn't call a meet cute. I mean, he's hiring her as a prostitute.
What do you do, Edward?
And like in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they're just thrown into this situation together. Nobody wanted it. Nobody asked for it. Those aren't necessarily cute meetings, but they are together on the page early on. Then you have to keep them together on the page more than 50% of the time, because again, that's what makes it a romance novel. So when you're building your plot, you need to think about, how can I make their lives intersect a lot? You don't want him pursuing a job in Japan and she's here in the United States building a shelter for animals. There's no way that the two of them are going to get together because there's no commonality in there. So the plots have to have some kind of a commonality where the main characters will crisscross with each other often so that, again, they can be on the page together so that they can be together to fall in love. To weave those three plots together, which is number 4, can be a tough thing to learn at first, but you can absolutely do it. There's a structure secret to that.
Do you know what the secret of life is?
So when you look at a romance novel, it's generally the character has some kind of external action towards their goal. So if he wants to buy the business, he's going to have a meeting with the business owner. There's going to be some kind of emotional reaction to how that works out. So after Richard Gere has the meeting with the business owner, he's kind of softening towards him. And then there is also an impact on the romance. Having Julia Roberts at the table with him humanized the whole thing, and again added to him feeling sympathy for the business owner. So you can see the action, the emotional reaction, and then the impact on the romance. And the plots generally kind of intersect like that. It doesn't have to be always ABC, but they have to kind of intersect in every single scene in some way. So the character is pursuing their external goal. They are growing and changing emotionally. And as that is happening, they are also falling in love with this other person. You don't want them to fall in love too quickly and get married like on page 3, because then the reader's like, okay, we're done. There's no more plot to follow. They're in love. So you really want to kind of draw that out and show the characters grow and change and pursue things. In order to learn how to do this, I highly suggest downloading this handout from my website and or analyzing movies that are romantic, because I think it's really easy to see the plots when you're watching it as opposed to reading it. Because sometimes when I'm reading, I totally forget to look for these things and I just kind of get really into the story. But if you look at the movie and you see here's the external, here's the internal, here's the romance, you can kind of see structure. When I did this highlighter thing that is on my website, I was able to have a visual roadmap of how a romance novel goes together. Learning that is what allowed me to sell my first book and launch this amazing career that I have had. When you write your first chapter, there are some other mistakes you definitely don't want to make. And those are in this video here, where I analyze the very first crappy manuscript I wrote and why it didn't work at all and why it didn't sell, and also how to fix it. So your first chapter will just be amazing.